everybody. This is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we've got a new subject that was brought to our attention by Tim White. And so I'll ask Tim to take a couple of moments and tell us about the 5 behaviors and how he stumbled across this and what we might want to do with it. So go ahead, Tim.
Hey, thank you, T, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, this was interesting to me because, and if I'm correct, it is connected to Patrick Lencioni. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's the one that wrote the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh,
And so I think this is a continuation of this model that we're looking at is born out of that work. And so I sent it over to T because I just thought it would be interesting to take a look at this relative to the change grid.
Right. And so if we think this is actually going to be directly connected to Lencioni's original work, yeah, that kind of has it make a little more sense. What I was wondering about is that apparently you can become certified as a facilitator for this particular model. And I wonder if that certification kind of includes those 5 core strengths of a key behaviors of a, is it what was it actually called? 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, or?
Well, the original was the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Ah, right. Yep. So apparently there's something magical about the number 5. So I thought, we could spend a little bit of time and talk about all this. There's also some sort of a connection between the 5 behaviors and the DISC profile that I stumbled across. And so perhaps we can take a look at that as well as we start to put this all together, figure out where do those tend to plot. Is there that much of a overlay on them? Okay, so how about anyone else on the call? Do you have any background in these 5 behaviors or the 5 dysfunctions?
I read the book, but I don't. That was a while ago, but I don't remember it actually. I do remember it being somehow associated with the disc, but I don't remember how.
Yeah. Well, I'll review them in just a second with everybody, but yeah. So anybody else have any background?
Yeah, T, I've facilitated this for a couple of clients. It's not terribly difficult, but Lencioni has his own consulting group called the Table Group that has actually taken a bit of business from me, unfortunately. But the 5, you were right earlier when you said the 5, I think it's the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team is the product that they offer for certification.
Oh, okay, fine. And so do you know, is there a specific diagnostic tool that is used to determine the degree to which the 5 dysfunctions are present on a particular team?
Yes.
And is that a DISC related profile or something totally different?
No, it's not. As a matter of fact, the Table Group is far more invested in MBTI than they are the DISC.
Oh, okay. All right.
It actually started out with the DISC and morphed into MBTI, but you do see some DISC elements in the report.
Okay.
And it is a basic questionnaire kind of a thing for a diagnostic.
All right. Okay. All right. How about Dragon? Any exposure to this in Europe?
No, not that I can think of.
It's been around for quite a while in the U.S. A book was published, and then I think there was a second edition that came out, and some workbook came out, and so it kind of had its period where it was all the rage, and then from what everyone's saying now, it seems like it evolved into something that people could become certified and do something about. So if you look at this little pyramid on the screen, I imagine you guys are seeing this. Yes, I'm sharing my screen. I can just tell you that the 5 dysfunctions parallel these, and so I'll tell you what the 5 dysfunctions are. Number 1 was the absence of trust. And so here they're talking about the 5 behaviors model. And what we would need to do is to go about, like if I click on this, I think it tells me about trust. Yeah. So when team members are genuinely transparent and honest with one another, it forms a safe environment that creates and builds vulnerability-based trust. I have to say from the very beginning, I don't know that I agree with that. I can certainly tell you there that trust, or how about this? No, honesty and transparency are things to be used thoughtfully and judiciously.
Mhm.
To be overly honest, overly candid, overly transparent can create its own set of problems within an
Mhm.
organization. So how many of you recognize that there are plenty of relationships you've had in your life or might even have to this very day where it's best to just bite your tongue? Because to be too honest, too candid, too whatever, is no guarantee of opening up the relationship and establishing trust. Anyone agree, disagree?
Yep.
Yeah,
Agree.
Yeah.
agree.
So we have to be thoughtful. People have a tendency, and I think this tends to be viewed as an American trait, and that is that we have a tendency to overshare. So we reveal too much information about ourselves too quickly. We seem to establish a certain level of intimacy in relationships that other countries would kind of go, that is reserved for only the closest of relationships, and even then behind closed doors. So I think this is just a very interesting assumption that team members need to be genuinely transparent and honest with one another because it forms a safe environment that creates and builds vulnerability-based trust. So do we all agree that things would be improved if we could increase the level of trust, but what they've just described here might be an extreme with its own problems?
Totally
For
agree.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not just the trust between the colleagues, it's also the management. I mean, it's much broader than this.
Well, exactly. And certainly in a large organization that becomes very political about, how are you going to align yourself so that you get the promotion and blah, blah, blah. I would say that to actually live the level of trust they've just described here could make you a very, I don't want to say, viewed as a very abrasive, non-diplomatic, insensitive, you know. Um, uh, in fact,
Yeah.
I'll share with you guys a little story. I've probably done this before. I've had the privilege of traveling all around the world doing training programs. And I can tell you that there are a lot of cultures that are, just by the way they were all raised, they tend to be very, gentle in whatever things they say about you to your face. And there are other cultures that tend to just bottom line it, just have no hesitation to just say, look, this is what is. And it's not saying anything negative about it's just acknowledging X is true. And so those cultures can be viewed sometimes as being rather abrupt, rather brutal, whatever. And meanwhile, those cultures think that if they have to carefully package and present the truth to another individual, that's more about that individual. It's not about them or their culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, it almost seems like this definition here puts the onus and responsibility on the individual and is not this, how can I say, collaborative or cohesive thing in
Yeah.
terms of their interaction with the environment. So, it's like you talk about that safe, secure, happy, and healthy. So if they're in an environment where they don't feel safe, secure, happy, and healthy, you're not going to get the trust because there's no credibility, there's no believability, right? So it's like this layered dimension that needs to happen for that behavior to really manifest itself. And the idea of transparent and you're not feeling safe, secure, happy, and healthy, I don't think that's realistic.
I don't think it's realistic. And let me add to that one of the things that I've always kind of presented to people that were doing any kind of relationship coaching or relationship consulting sort of projects is that generally speaking, when it comes to human behavior, and I believe this is going to be true across most cultures, is that trust is a gift freely given. What I mean by that is that when we first meet someone, our default is to trust them until they give us evidence as to why we should not. Now, that evidence can be presented to us within milliseconds. But when we are taught, because if we didn't trust them from the very get-go, we would be hesitant to approach them. You know, somehow we're receiving a message that says, stay away, keep your guard up, etc. But we'd at least like to go into any new interaction with the thought that this is someone that I could trust, given unless I'm given evidence to the contrary. That's certainly a very North American kind of a tendency. We have a tendency to trust anybody and everybody that are total strangers to us until they give us the slightest bit of evidence that we should not trust them.
Question, please.
Yes, go right ahead.
Are you referring now to private interactions or company-wise?
Pretty much in general. Pretty much in general. When we go into a new corporate setting, we have a tendency to believe that this is a company that we can trust, that the people that have brought us in are trustworthy. Oh, wait, someone's trying to sell me an extended warranty on my car. So I get the same call from the same number every single day. So anyway,
block it.
I've tried, and then they keep just modifying the number by one digit.
Oh, yeah.
But it comes in from Monroe, North Carolina. I don't know anybody in Monroe, North Carolina. Anyway, so yeah, I think that we may go into a business situation with a little bit less of an open heart and an open mind. And I'll ask all you guys to chime in your personal experience. I can certainly tell you that when I go to even like a business mixer kind of thing, back in the days when we did those sorts of things, we go to a networking event. The hope above all hopes was that every person you would talk to is someone who could open doors of opportunity for you. And so there was a natural tendency to trust until that person gave you evidence as to why you should not trust them. And again, it can occur within seconds. Now, once someone gives us that evidence, then this next part of what I said, and I genuinely mean that, is that the trust is gone and it's lost forever. Good luck rebuilding trust. So once you go like, I'm never, people might forgive, but they do not forget. And so even if trust is broken and people try to do whatever they can do to rebuild or heal that trust, what's the likelihood the trust will ever be fully present, without regard for past performance, past history?
Well,
Yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say sometimes that plays out in terms of employees' perception of the organization and being trustworthy.
Yep.
I went through with a major insurance company, we went through a downsizing and we had like 200 field offices of varying sizes. And I was on a team where we had to go out to those offices and just sort of talk with the employees about what they were experiencing and feeling. And I remember part of the exercise in that was to give them a flip chart and ask them to draw their feelings. And this one team had a shoe, and then they had people flying as if they had been kicked by the shoe. And so when we were explaining it, they said, yeah, and this is our manager kicking out our friends who used to work here. And the woman who was the manager was new to that location. And she and I had a sidebar, and she was really emotionally affected by that. And she was like, Tim, I didn't lay them off. I just got assigned to this location. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But this whole thing around trust, I mean, they didn't even trust her with her, coming in, and she had nothing to do with whose names were on the list, but she was representative of the organization, and there was just no trust there at all.
I'm glad you brought that up, because my next little bullet point on my little notes I have next to me is that a lack of trust is a contagion. So once we feel that there is reason why we should mistrust someone, we will start warning everybody else not to trust them as well.
Mm.
And so suddenly mistrust spreads across, families, whatever level group you want to look at, but companies, societies, and even we talk about, the whole reform that's being talked about in the police. It's like, there are bad police officers out there, make no mistake about it, but how many millions of police officers are there all across the country? I got to believe that
Yeah.
whatever the pool of bad cops is a very tiny fraction of what the entire police force might look like. Nevertheless, do people say, I mistrust certain police officers, or based on their experience or the experience of others that they know, they don't trust the police? And it becomes a declarative statement of mistrust across an entire situation.
Unfairly.
It might be unfair, but this is the human behavior element of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, of course, because now the trust has to be rebuilt. And every time I hear that, my head automatically goes, well, good luck with that. So, because
Yeah.
that's going to take a very long time, and woe be unto you if, as you go about building that trust, there is even the slightest moment where that reason to mistrust reappears. Because
Mhm.
now that's confirming everything in the person's bias.
And you definitely see it in unionized environments.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, where there is no trust of management, and all managers get painted under the same brush.
Mhm.
So if there is anger and hatred towards management, if you are a member of management, then that is applied to you. I did some work with one of the big three auto firms, and it got to the point where I could just predict it almost within the first 10 minutes of every session I'd kick off. Someone in the room would raise their hand and say, I have a question. Yes, sir. So are you from management or are you from the union?
Mhm.
And so,
Wow.
and that would determine people's behavior.
Right. Because
It
it's
may be, but here in Michigan, where a lot of the major unions reside, we've had serious breaches of public trust, and many of them go to prison. And so, we actually have a different scenario playing out kind of in the UAW, where people don't trust the union.
right.
Mhm.
Right. Well, and I might have shared with you guys before that my father was the head of labor relations for the Fisher Body division of General Motors. And so he spent all of his time either sitting at a negotiations table or getting prepared for a negotiation or dealing with whatever the aftermath happens to have been when, a so-called agreement is reached and all that. And I can tell you that you didn't talk about unions in my household. Mm-mm. My dad
Wow.
represented management, and you did not talk about that. Otherwise, he would go off on all kinds of examples of why the union, et cetera, et cetera. And what David's alluding to, it may very well have started, this level of accountability long after my dad retired. I mean, my dad's been dead for years upon years, and he had retired 2 decades before that. So, yeah, but it's an interesting kind of thing.
So
But
is there a relevancy? I'm sorry.
no, go right ahead.
Is there perhaps Tim or yourself can answer this in terms of this model? Is there a relevancy as to why trust is at the bottom of this pyramid?
Yeah.
Is that to apply like
No.
a base, a grounding of sorts?
As you work your way through these others can't begin to happen effectively until the trust is in place. It is the foundation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next one we'll get to is about conflict, how you deal with conflict. Well, you can't deal effectively with conflict until there's trust, because otherwise
Okay.
you're just
Team,
fighting.
the table group promotes healthy conflict. They
Yep.
like conflict.
Yep.
They promote that. And I have to tell you, I disagree to the bottom of my soul that conflict is a good thing.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, the second dysfunction is fear of conflict. So I can't wait to get into that. But let me just finish this one little thing about trust. If you think about it, the primary motivation for unions being formed, and I'm talking the better part of 100 years ago, if not longer, was because management could not be trusted to do the right thing when it came to treating their employees. I mean, you know, you can talk about unions and what unions do in our modern age, but keep in mind that this is not the age in which unions were born. When unions first started, you got to go back to a very different time in the world of labor. And so I kind of believe that unions were the result of mistrust. So someone had to defend.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well,
Okay, yeah, go ahead,
that's
Tim.
definitely true, T. When you look at labor law and you look at, you know, what happened and what created the need for unions, it had everything to do with the relationship between worker and management and this whole issue of trust.
Yep. Well, in fact, the existence of laws could very well be evidence of the fact that at a certain point, we could no longer trust the common man to do the right thing just out of their integrity. We had to make sure there were laws that would force them to do the right thing. And so even the existence of laws raises a question mark about the degree to which trust is present. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, so I hate to blow their model. I do agree if we could do something to make the environment a bit more trusting, a bit more trust, that's fine. But the thought that you're going to achieve this, and the biggest thought of all, that a totally transparent and honest environment equals a safe environment. I don't think that's the case at all. You know.
No.
I mean, how many of us have ever tried to do even a basic 360 with an executive, and only to find out that as we're starting to share the feedback from their direct reports or people down the organizational ladder, they immediately want to know who said that.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, it's like, wait. Who said it is not what's important. It's what was said. And then they'd even threaten your engagement with them because you were expected to suddenly reveal that which was
Right.
to be held confidential.
Mhm.
So there you go. So
And
trust
the
is
worse the
gone.
report, the more there was a lack of trust.
Yep, exactly right.
Exactly.
And even where there's a lack of trust to begin with, how does that affect our ability to get the truth from the employees? Because they don't trust we're going to hold it confidential. They don't trust all that sort of stuff. And so I just think it's interesting. This model just says, yeah, just go out there and fix trust, then you'll be fine.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, okay. All right. So I guess we're having a conflict with trust, but as David said, they do consider conflict to be a positive thing. And I will agree that when a disagreement arises, it's a good thing for people to have the skill set and the emotional intelligence to be able to manage that conflict in a way. But I'd much rather say, well, how do we go about avoiding conflicts arising
To
to
start
begin with?
with.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
And I'm
think
not
that's
talking
the
about,
real challenge
yeah,
because
yeah.
what David just described, I was in a meeting. There's always this chasm between physician CEOs or management, MBA CEOs, and that's like been in the healthcare industry forever, right? So the idea that they were expressing was similar to what David just expressed, was it's good that we have this conflict because without the conflict, we would not be able to see what the real problems are. And that was my feedback to them, was why don't we work on not having problems to start with? What about that? Well, why aren't we trying to resolve that instead of bickering about what conflict we have? And so
Or if we have a problem, why not use the path to self-discovery to work it out?
There we go.
right.
Thank you.
And that's missing. So what T was talking about in terms of having the skills to manage it is what seems to be the missing key that was even
And
talked
you know why
about in that
this,
scenario, but they were
Brian,
exactly.
you know why this resounds with a lot of leaders is because they're so used to conflict. When they see it in the model, they somehow are more drawn to it. Like conflict is
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, I think that conflict, if it's not handled properly, is going to damage trust.
Yes.
Mm.
And they're saying that, well, no, it's because you've got this fully trusting, transparent, blah, blah, blah environment that now you can have, look at this, engage in unfiltered, constructive debate of ideas.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Wow.
share with you that I have done, you get a lot of training programs across Europe. And you guys probably know I went to a Dutch college. And so I've always, when I fly into the Netherlands, I have always felt like I'm home. I feel like they're my people because there is a directness, a bluntness that is both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. So Dragon, can you address?
Yeah, exactly. For a lot of people that experience that in Holland, the Dutch are pretty much, and it's not from a bad place. I mean,
Nope.
it's the way they are, and they're very open and direct, and even blunt, you could say,
Yep.
for other cultures.
Yep.
But it can help. I mean,
Sure.
and again, you get used to everything, and once that's your modus operandi, that's your modus operandi. So
Yep.
they are very open and direct.
They
But
are.
for some
Well, that's why
cultures,
when I looked at
too
this, I
much.
said, when I looked at unfiltered, I would describe a lot of the meetings I have witnessed with clients in the Netherlands and all across actually that region of Europe. Oh, there's a lot of unfiltered stuff. It's all coming from a constructive place. These people are not like out and out fighting with one another. Although I'll tell you, at times it does get a little bit
Oh
personal.
yeah.
But by and large, they don't seem to hesitate to say whatever it is that need to be said. And I'll take that up a step. If you go to Sweden, now there's this another little dimension you're going to add to it, and that is that the Swedes have zero regard for hierarchy whatsoever. Even a school child will refer to their teacher by the teacher's first name. There is no Mr., Miss, there is no last name being used. Everything is equalized across all over. And so you will have people in a conflict that have no hesitation whatsoever telling the boss or the business owners that they're wrong and here's why. And so it's a very
That's gonna work
interesting.
out really well.
Well, it does seem to work out well in that culture. But boy, if you bring some of those executives into the US and say, here's your group, just do what you've always done, and they do that, oh, this is not going to go over well. So it does have to be culturally. You got to be
tell me, even in Sweden, if somebody said the boss was an idiot or wrong, and this is why, that there would be no emotion elicited from that comment?
Yeah, well, it is correct. There would be no reaction to it whatsoever.
Wow.
It's because it's considered. Now, again, it's all done in a way that's respectful. It's all done in a way that's intended to be constructive, because I've watched plenty of Swedes get into very close to having physical fights with one another, but it tended to be around, it didn't happen in a business setting. It wasn't, none of this is personalized. It's all X is true. And how we feel about X being true is irrelevant because it doesn't change the fact that X is true. If a boss misses a deadline, I promise you the employees have no hesitation whatsoever telling the boss that they dropped the ball.
Interesting.
And that's just the way that it is. This whole thing about equality across all boards. So it's a very different kind of a thing about how it is. And so the point is, when you start looking at trust and how trust then leads you to being able to have some sort of constructive debate. Although I got to say, and David, maybe you agree with me on this, I don't think that constructive debate equals conflict.
No.
Exactly. I was about to say, I mean, it comes so many times it comes to a definition. What are we talking about in the word,
Right. And to me, conflict is somebody did something that upset somebody else, or that there is a real powerful disagreement about how something was done, is being done, or is going to be done. And that's where things can get a little bit more charged. But so now,
What
David,
was that term that you use? Constructive debate?
Yeah, that's what it says even here on the definition on the screen. They're talking about engage in unfiltered constructive debate. And I don't consider constructive debate to be conflict.
No.
That almost sounds like there is what's that training that you did? Common ground. Like
Common
there's
ground,
yeah, like these positional aspect of
yeah.
that present for, as opposed to conflict sounds like, you know, you have an actor or perpetrator of some sort, and someone's on the other side that
Mm.
you know, didn't want what they received or didn't
Yeah.
like it or something.
And then let's say you're in one of those discussions. And by the way, since you brought up common ground, let me just say that there are certain cultures that are more aligned towards common ground to begin with, and other cultures that have to work very hard to understand, appreciate, and pursue the goals of common ground. So, for example, maybe one of the reasons why Sweden functions the way Sweden functions is because from the very beginning, everything there is about common ground.
Mhm.
So, okay, anywho, but you just said something, oh, this idea that how does something go from being a constructive, what they call it, debate to a conflict? And I wonder if that's when the the breaches of trust start to appear, and that's how it moves into conflict.
Mm.
So because someone said or did something that now felt as though it's like a personal attack, or
Right.
questioning
Very
someone's.
robust debate inside the path.
Yeah, you can. This is it. So go ahead, David, walk us through the path in a constructive way versus how you've witnessed people do things.
So we have to start out, where are we? How'd we get here?
Mhm.
You know, what are the facts surrounding the situation? What happened? And be clear about that, and everyone agree as to what the current situation is. Then talking about what we were trying to accomplish. What was our goal? Why was it important? What benefit and value did we see from achieving that goal? And then obviously what got in our way? You know, what prevented us from succeeding? And ultimately, what do we do after we've prioritized those obstacles about those to achieve the end result?
Mm.
Mhm. And see, and when people don't follow the path with that, what happens, or in fact, if you guys are even working with the client, following the path of self-discovery to deal with whatever the issue happens to be, it's interesting how often you will hear people try to throw in some red information,
Yeah.
Mhm.
some emotion they have, some feeling, some hunch, some piece of
During the
history.
facts.
Right.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's where you kind of go, well, wait. You know, it's not quite time for that, but they're revealing to you that they don't trust the process. They don't trust that people are going to include everything that needs to be included. So they have to say it now, lest it be forgotten or whatever. So it's an interesting kind of a thing. So David, though, you said, so you're okay with healthy debate. It's when it becomes conflict that becomes the problem. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let me throw this to all of you guys in terms of your personal relationships. So how often in your life, and whatever the relationship happens to have been, do you begin talking about an issue and very quickly the subject changes to not what the issue is, but how you're talking about the issue? Because you always do this, or you did this last time. Is wait, are we talking about the issue, or are we talking about our history of talking about issues? You
Mhm.
know, what are we really arguing about now? And I think you do find very quickly that the subject matter moves away from whatever the issue is, and now it's back to stuff being rehashed and revisited, you know, coming back to haunt you yet again. Well, to me, that's evidence of the trust was never rebuilt. So
Right.
there's still this element.
Downgrade maneuvers until you get back to center.
Gotta have downgrade maneuvers until you're back to center. That's exactly right.
Interesting.
Exactly right.
So is this model international? These
Oh,
certifications? Is
I
it?
believe
Or
this model is everywhere the book went.
Yep.
So
oh, okay.
I don't know. I haven't looked it up to see how many different languages that book was translated into, but I suspect a whole pile of them.
And David, did you know that Patrick is president of the Table Group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a project with a super regional insurance carrier where I was doing all their executive coaching, and I did that for 8 years. And around year 6, for his birthday, I gave the CEO a copy of one of Pat Lencioni's books. And he read it and he was intrigued. So this is all my fault. I just want to bottom line it for you. It's all my fault. And he contacted the table group and they sent out this guy, Pat Ritchie, who used to work with the San Francisco 49ers and has, you know, story upon story, contact upon contact to impress CEOs. And I told him, I said, you know, I just have, you know, a significant problem with productive conflict. I don't think there's any such thing. And, you know, they engaged him, but, you know, the CEO, after we did ChangeWorks, for every executive meeting, which was a full day, twice a month, he would walk in, sit down, pull out his card, put it next to him and facilitate the meeting. So, and they still use it to this day. They still have somebody inside who's certified in ChangeWorks.
Yep.
Which I didn't know. The one had retired, but you know, they re-engaged the table group because the CEO, the high-level management, they really, they're debaters and they're all, if you want to go to the disc, they're all high D, high C. So they live in conflict. And instead of pushing the path to self-discovery as the tool for decision-making and problem solving, they're kind of, you know, exploring this idea of healthy conflict. And I just don't agree. As an OD professional,
and I think it's also part because conflict in and of itself is an inherently dangerous activity.
Yep.
There's going to be consequences, prices, a price to be paid. And I wonder how much of that price tag is all about undermined trust.
Yep.
And then what? Now the whole pyramid collapses.
Yeah. Well, they say you have trust to be able to have conflict. So if you're having conflict, there must be trust.
Yeah. Again,
realize that it's eroding that foundation.
Nope, they don't. Because again, if we go back to their definition of trust, this idea that there is this, that a safe environment actually exists, I think is number one. You know, kind of there should be a Disney song accompanying that one. It's very naive. And vulnerability-based trust means that the more I show myself as being weak, the more trustworthy I become.
Dangerous.
Very dangerous. And, you know, again, if we go back to spiral dynamics, maybe a couple more gyrations up the spiral, but not right now. There's too much that is transparency, honesty.
I want to take this recording and send it to my client.
Okay, I'll let you know when it's ready. It'll be up on YouTube, so you feel free.
But it's like all of these terms up here have dimensions to them, like layers to them. Like what, you know, David just described sound like, you know, you started with this outgrid kind of behavior and you're moving further to the danger zone. So, you know, the more expressive it becomes, it seemed like. So it seems like there's layers to each one of these in terms
there
of
are.
You know, and how you can pile it on.
And then, you know, go back, Brian, to the thought that this is all based on the belief that there is a unique set of dysfunctions that occur in a team. I don't know why 5. I can certainly think of a couple more that aren't on this list. So, but nevertheless, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And one of those dysfunctions was a fear of conflict. Now, I agree that people shouldn't be afraid of conflict. They should be, you know, ready, trained to go in there and handle a conflict in an appropriate way. I mean, good grief, Tim, talk to us about mediation and facilitation. It's like, I mean, there'd be no opportunity for that as a livelihood if conflict didn't exist. So.
But, you know, T, that's interesting because I was having a conversation with a colleague this week and she's about to engage a client. And there is conflict in that organization, but her point of contact does not want to address that. She specifically said to my colleague, she wants to keep the mood happy. She wants people to feel good about the session. And I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, because what's that going to do to trust? Yeah, so people just they don't understand. I've always felt like I have to operate my practice in a real world. And when I go to work with a client, I have to do my work inside of their real world, in air quotes. I can't just come along with some magical Disney princess model and say, all you have to do is just adopt this fully and everything will take care of itself. I don't think that that's realistic. Now, again, can we move in a positive direction towards getting a little bit better at each one of these? Absolutely. But yeah, got some issues. It's like I want to say to some of the clients I've worked with, in fact, how about we'll just do this. You guys think about the decision makers and the clients that you've worked with over the years. And I want you to answer this question on their behalf. Do you really want your team members to be genuinely transparent and honest with you? Yeah, what are they going to say? It's kind of like, hell no.
Yeah,
I'm afraid of what they're going to say. Well, should they be genuinely transparent and honest with one another? No, because now they're all just going to fight and whatever. You got to know how you're going to heal those relationships. That environment is going to be anything but safe for a while. Yeah, go
It
ahead.
might be interesting to have a chat with Patrick Lencioni, because I maybe this word conflict is misused here. Basically, the way I maybe understand it is, you do want people to be trustworthy, to feel safe, to get into discussions, because just like you mentioned, a lot of people are afraid to discuss something because there
Yes.
will be maybe they think there will be conflict. So in that sense, they need to feel trustworthy, safe surroundings, whatever. So
yeah.
maybe this word conflict should be something else. Just engage,
Well, and
engage in
maybe
discussions.
Well, I think, this idea of a constructive debate, I think that one's fine, debate, but there's a fear of conflict is exactly as he states it. And the fear of it is probably what he would emphasize. It's like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should be ready to have it.
Exactly.
And we should, as opposed to somewhere along the line, it became that they want people to deliberately engage in conflict. And it's like, I don't pull that out of his initial definition of the dysfunction. So just because I shouldn't be afraid of it doesn't mean I should go out there and stir it up.
So it's like anger management until somebody pee off
Right.
somebody, and
Until the fists start flying. Right. Okay. So now you go to the next one. Commitment. Now this addresses that there is a lack of commitment. That's one of the dysfunctions. An absence of trust, a fear of conflict, a lack of commitment. So commitment. When team members are able to offer opinions and debate ideas, they feel heard and respected and will be more likely to commit to decisions. Well, I see those as two things that don't necessarily lead from one to another. I can certainly offer my opinion, and I can engage in all kinds of healthy debate. I can feel totally heard and very respected, but that doesn't mean I'm going to commit to a decision I think is stupid. So,
Right. Being committed, in my opinion, is uniquely different than just being interested in something. Like you're able to express your opinion. You're able to participate at a level that might pique your interest, but that doesn't mean you're just going to be committed to the cause.
Yep. And what level of consensus are they looking for here for this to be achieved? I mean, if you want 100% consensus among a group of intelligent people that are, each bringing their unique insight, skills, knowledge, experiences to whatever the discussion happens to be, why do I think it's unrealistic that they're all going to be on board? And that no matter how much discussion we have, how much trust we think there is, how much skill we demonstrate in conflict resolution, all these respect, that doesn't mean we're all going to be on the same page. So
How old is this model? Because I want to
1990s.
so I wonder, does it take into consideration like these terminology of like knowledge worker, right? So knowledge workers have knowledge, like they can look things up. When we talk about even trust, people can look up physicians, their grade, their education, their training, but once they go to the office to actually experience engagement with them, that all might change. It's the same thing when you get to any of these other, in terms of conflict and commitment, you're dealing with knowledge workers. They can look up basic information
Yeah.
that they're bringing to the table. So it's like, is that considered here in any of these things, or like what role does that play when you're dealing with true knowledge workers who have information at instantize in a click, like literally anyone with access to a mobile phone, they can find out some things even if management isn't speaking about it. They can look up things about their particular industry, their sector, those kinds of things, and find out information and come up with their own hypotheses as to why things are going on. This was said when Enron and all those organizations, people knew there was something going on. It wasn't being expressed, but they had a hunch something was going on, just the way people were acting in the organization. They couldn't do anything with it because they didn't have, the power. But I just want to do these models take that into consideration, that you're working with knowledge workers, and you have to kind of meet them where they are for any of this stuff to work in terms of engagement. I keep going back to this idea that 80% of people, particularly in America, are disengaged. Engagement tends to start on a personal level, that back down to that trust, and then it grows from there into other things. And so I don't know that these models consider that, because it seems like we just keep going through the same kinds of things, of issues, and it doesn't get any better, and then come out with the next trend, the next fad or something like that. And it just doesn't deal with people in real time to meet them where they are.
It's really interesting. Do you guys remember what the style of the 5 dysfunctions was? Was it a how-to book?
It was a parable.
It was a parable.
Like a parable, yeah.
Right. And so let me read something I'd found. Since we are obviously all being rather critical of the model, and legitimately so, I thought I'd do a little search for criticism of the 5 dysfunctions model. And here's one of the things I found. So Gordon Curfey and Robert Hogan, both organizational psychologists and leadership researchers, provide a critical perspective on Lencioni's team model in their book, The Rocket Model: Practical Advice for Building High-Performance Teams. While they clearly emphasize the 5 distinctions of a team's contributions to the field, they also point out major drawbacks of the model. And so they're very glowing in that. I won't drag you through all that, but it's just real, basic kind of stuff, the recognition of time wasted avoiding conflict, blah, blah, blah. So the simplicity of the 5 dysfunctions model and key insights make it popular among human resource professionals and team consultants. Nonetheless, Lencioni's book is explicitly a work of fiction. It is not based on research, and its practical recommendations lack empirical support. For example, when the trust level among team members is low, Lencioni recommends that leaders put them through a series of personal disclosures. However, there is little likelihood that these activities can build trust in dysfunctional work teams. According to Katzenbach and Smith, the only effective method for teams to build trust and cohesion is to do real work. And using the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the results do not constitute real work. Similar problems afflict the 4 other dysfunctions. So there you go, David. I wonder if Lencioni thinks he wrote a work of fiction.
Well, if you read any of his books, they're all parable
They're all
style.
parable style. Yep. Yep. Makes it
Mhm.
an easy read, very marketable. That's a formula that works very well for short read business books. But now you
Mhm.
go, someone has come along and said, based on that, so based on a work of fiction, we're going to put together this model to help people develop these 5 behaviors. And even as we've been talking about how the very first one, the foundation trust, is doomed to failure because it's unrealistic in its understanding and expectation of the way people are.
What they have you do during the trust phase is sit around in a large group and you have to, and everyone has to tell you one thing that they like that you do and one thing that they don't like that you do. I'm sorry,
Oh,
that just,
Mm.
you
sure.
know,
Well, that's going to do nothing but awaken warm fuzzies and hugs all around, won't it?
yep,
So it's like,
yep.
come on.
That's how they process that out, T, to try and generate trust.
No, 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 no. To me, I would say to you that even someone who is a clinical psychologist who is dealing with a single couple that's in conflict with one another would shy very far away from that exercise early on.
Mhm.
Yep.
Early on, you have to establish common ground first. So let's
Mhm.
celebrate all the reasons we have to trust one another and all the things that we've done together to demonstrate that trust we have in one another. And once we fully explore that, understand that, really embrace that, now we can say, let's talk about a way in which we are in conflict with one another, or different opinions we hold on something. But I don't think that you build trust that way. They've just described. Oh my
No.
God. Oh, luckily that means we've just got more messes to go and clean up with clients.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Now,
I heard that comment of manage things but lead people. And I think this is good for people who want to manage some things,
yeah,
but again, it's not going to work if you're actually leading people.
right, right. And and then we get to the one above this. And again, I think that the whole commitment concept is flawed because and no one's ever going to be on the page. Even people who say, well, it's not what I want to do, but I'll be a team player. Oh, fine. Let's go ahead. Let's do it. If I said that as a person, I'm telling you that there's a voice in my head that's saying, and someday I will say, I told you so.
Hmm.
So, because I don't believe whatever it is, I can't trust, I can't whatever. So if that one's flawed, and the one before that is flawed, and the one before that one is flawed, well, why do I think that accountability is going to have its own set of problems? So holding one
Mhm.
another accountable. Once everyone, that whole world there, everyone is committed to a clear plan of action. By the way, I don't know where was the action ever developed. See, to me, that's also one of the dysfunctions of a team is where do we clearly communicate what it is that the team is all about? What are we doing? How are we going to go about doing it? I don't see where that is done in this. It's like we just jump from, we don't have any conflict now, so let's all have our commitment. To what? So I just don't see where that's been. They will be more willing to hold one another accountable.
Mm-mm.
Well, how about if I said the most important thing about accountability is that people hold themselves accountable for their own
Mhm.
performance?
That's where it
And
begins.
you're right. And if we all focus on doing whatever we are accountable for, then I shouldn't be all that worried about other people unless their lack of accountability or their lack of follow through has done something to undermine or compromise my ability to fulfill what I've committed to do.
Mhm.
And now I've got a conflict because, oh, now I can't trust you because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. So to me, the whole thing is just kind of fallen.
Instead of a pyramid, it should be a cycle.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree. And every
Yeah.
one of these defaults back down to the bottom. If we encounter a problem at any of these
Yep.
levels, it's going to go back to trust. We don't go back up. Accountability doesn't go back to reviewing commitment. Accountability problems means I got to go back now and revisit trust because I thought I could trust you. that you do, and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to results, and we're at the top of the hour, so I wanted to finish this subject today. Focusing on achieving collective results. The ultimate goal is the achievement of results, unlocked through implementing the model's principles of trust, conflict, commitment, and accountability. Where do we talk about what the work is? David, do you know, where do they ever talk about?
They have a pretty extensive training manual that has a lot of, subroutines and exercises. It is, meaningfully constructed, but the foundation is what's lacking as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, and I don't see where the yellow step is in this whole kind of thing. Where do we talk about? Is that all in conflict? Is that where we start to have discussions about what the work is and what the challenges have been? I mean, is there even a semblance of a path walk?
Yeah, I don't think
Because
so.
I could say I could do a better job with the path of self-discovery if I was doing it among people who had a reasonable amount of trust for one another and trust in the overall objectives. And then certainly I know as we start talking about the path, I know there's been disagreements even at the green step. What are we trying to create and how are we going to measure that and what's really important? So I know people need to get clarity around that. Certainly when we start to talk about the obstacles, this could awaken disagreements. We gotta now talk about what's the actual solution look like? What's the plan look like? And I don't see where there's a separate space for that, but it would all fit into conflict because I can't commit until that whole path, white, green, black, yellow, is complete. So I guess it bothers me that they haven't said, well, that part of the whole proper functioning of a team doesn't even deserve its own level in the pyramid. It just is going to be kind of like along the way, yes, we'll figure out what it is we're trying to do. And then we'll get a commitment to it. So I feel that's a huge jump that's being made. Thoughts, comments?
See, it looks like it's focusing on developing interpersonal skills among team members as opposed to trying to figure out how to resolve an organizational issue or challenge.
Right, yeah. And even if we're working on the individual relationships, I go back to their little question mark, and this is where the all fit into conflict. It says, the only effective method for teams to build trust and cohesion is to do real work. And I would say if I was working with an individual, I was working with an individual who's in conflict with someone, it's by reviewing the real work that has been done, the real work that is being done, the success that they've had there, the trust that's been built as that all goes on. I think it's got to get back to real interactions, not some contrived exercise we can do in a classroom setting.
Yeah, real interactions, and this is where the environment becomes important, and the design of the environment becomes important because you need feedback, and you need a feedback loop.
Yep.
Because now you're getting that empirical data that says, oh, okay, we thought, because everyone knows that I can have the perfect strategy, the perfect plan, and things may not go according to plan. So
Right.
there's some things that I can't take account for. And that's why I like to say the experience of the experience matters, not just the experience itself, right? It's how you're experiencing it, in that feedback loop.
Yeah, and to look at the pyramid then about that feedback loop, a commitment was made, but the results never happened. So you're just saying it just didn't pan out. Well, then we should be able to provide some feedback from what we learned at the commitment level that may point back to there being conflicts that were not satisfactorily resolved, or even all the way back down to trust.
Yeah.
Yep. And so when it comes to integrating in, this is the circle of brilliance. So our question is always, is this a model we would want to merge in to our understanding of tension management? Is this model contributing anything to what we already know? And then the second question is, can we contribute something to this model that can make it more effective. So what would your answers be to those two questions?
I think the second one is a definite yes. They could see you know, David could have a multi-million-dollar business off of this.
Just go find out every place that this is being done and then go fix it.
I mean, really, because it doesn't seem like the tension aspect is actually considered in any of these dimensions. And so I think that's an added value perspective in terms of that real work.
Yep. So we would add that tension dimension to it. We would certainly add more of a fleshing out of what the real work is.
Right.
So
because how do you know that trust is working? How do you know we're on the right path in terms of expressing the trust? There's a whole lot of things.
Well, and how about if we just said, look, trust is also situational.
Right.
I don't need to trust you in every single way in order to trust you that you will do this one little thing, because our common ground, there's always some common ground. If we share an element of common ground, we already trust one another as far as that element of common ground is concerned. So I don't necessarily need to trust you in every way, shape, or form. I just need to trust you in the context of what it is that we're doing. But I don't see where the we're doing. So I think we'd add that too. David, what do you think?
I can see tension management kind of flowing through this model a little bit, but if you think about it, you take trust, you've got a low level of tension, and you move into conflict, which is a high level of tension.
Yeah.
I can't see any way that this builds towards results.
Yeah, I just don't see. Yeah. Okay. And so I will be bold enough and Dragon. Tim, feel free, chime in what your thoughts are as well. But I don't see how this would ever be integrated into what we do to represent any kind of an enhancement or improvement to what we already have in place. But we could definitely go in and fix this. And we can certainly go where this has gone and repair the damage. That's been done. Yep. So see, not all attempts at integration end up becoming a glowing merge of brilliance. Yeah, because there you go. There you go. Okay, anyway, final comments, final thoughts?
No. Hey, but listen, thanks for taking a look. No, thanks for taking a look at it. I appreciate it. It was great dialogue.
Yeah, good. All righty. And David, I will put this up on YouTube, and so you can feel free to share it with whomsoever.
I'm sure it'd go a long way to motivating that client to change his mind.
Well, you know, if his mind is open, then he should hear the truth. This is a flawed model based on a work of fiction.
Yeah, you got a famous author who decided to go into the consulting business and build a group based all off of a faulty model.
This is right.
And they're doing millions.
Yeah, exactly. Of course they are. Of course they are. But I wonder how often they begin each of their programs by saying, like, before we get into any of our specific details, we want to remind all of you that this was based on a work of fiction that has no research behind it, and our practical recommendations lack all empirical support. Just so you know that. Now let's get to work. You know? Like, what? Yeah, so, okay, anyway, there you go. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk again on Tuesday.
All right,
thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.